pop up the agenda. We'll get started. All righty. Hello, everyone. My name's John Mudd. I'm the chair of this meeting, and welcome everybody. I really appreciate having you here. We have a packed agenda as usual, right? We always pack it in, right, Luana?
Yep.
So we have someone from Community Speaks that's going to be talking about what they're doing is a survey and on food insecurity. Every year they do a survey and they do a lot of research, and it's very useful. And Viren is here. He's going to be talking about the Midtown South Mixed-Use Plan and maybe a little bit more. And then Andre, I think, should be popping in, and Marquise should be coming. Although I didn't get a confirmation from those folks. And Renee should be here. We'll recap what's going on with the public housing issue. Um, let's see. If you want to add something to the agenda, if something's very important to you, please email it to me. We can always find room on the agenda or a future agenda. If you want a couple of minutes, it's no problem for updates. We do have a little update section. You can chime in. And when it comes to the larger discussions, we need a little advance notice. Of course, we're here to, fet out the issues, revolving around housing, homelessness, and health. Um, yeah, we haven't really had a policy meeting. We've got that on hold. We'll start that when we sink our teeth into something that we want to kind of work on, any kind of policy. We've got a couple of things in mind, but we need a little bit more help and some more involvement. Um, and by all means, if you want to be involved with the council, volunteering, I'm looking for board members. Please let me know. Which reminds me, there was someone that actually stepped forward and wanted to participate on our board, and I have yet to get back to. Um, we have our hands full. Um, uh, let's see. Do we have uh, any elected officials here right now? I think Zelnor wanted to pop in and say a couple of things.
Hi, John. Sorry, I'm here from Zelnor's team. He should be joining in like the next few minutes, if that's fine.
Okay. All right. Let me know. And I think Rob's probably away. He's usually with us. He's always got something going. And Alex, I don't see Alex here. So we'll move on to our first agenda item. Is Harini here? Yeah.
Yes. Hi.
Hi,
Oops.
Harini. Good to have you. Um,
Oh, whoops.
I'm
Um,
going to put you on speaker view and let you have the floor, and you go ahead and introduce yourself. We'll jump right in and to your agenda item if you don't mind.
yeah,
And
absolutely.
okay, you want to give us a little review of who you are and the community speaks, and then take away what your needs are and what you want.
Yeah, absolutely. Hi everyone. I'm Harini. And as John said, I'm from Community Speak. Thank you so much again for having me and for making the time for me in your agenda. I know that it's really packed. But yeah, I am just here to talk a little bit about the project, just kind of what we do, what our objectives are, and most importantly, the role that our partners play in our work, which is kind of where Midtown South Community Council comes in. I did have some slides, but I see that screen sharing
Okay.
isn't enabled,
Yeah,
but
I can fix that. That's not a problem. Let me just give you co-host, and you have the power.
oh, perfect. Thank you so much. Oops. I hope that's visible.
It's black right now, but it should be. There we go.
There you go.
Ah,
Yeah.
amazing. Alrighty. But yeah, so to start, I just wanted to talk a little bit about our mission and our framework, just so we have a broad view of things. So our mission kind of summarized is that we promote data-driven community engagement in public policy, and we really try to elevate the needs of specifically local communities to policymakers. So kind of breaking that down or kind of going back to how we identified this. So we kind of identified when you think about the impacts of different crises, so specifically COVID-19, economic downturns, increases in crime, all kinds of different crises that communities have experienced, we found that there were significant gaps in the knowledge of those kind of impacts and how they differ between different communities, such as low-income families and vulnerable communities. We found that, oops, oh,
Go ahead.
oh, sorry, I'm seeing the waiting room notifications.
I'm sorry.
No, that's completely fine. But yeah, we noticed that there was that significant gap in knowledge in terms of how those impacts of these crises are affecting different communities, and that there wasn't micro level data that policymakers and community leadership were able to use to address those complex impacts, specifically community specific data. So when you think about larger level, macro level data, we're not really able to capture those unique characteristics and those differing needs the same way that lower level, community level data is able to. So this is kind of where our framework comes into play and how we kind of develop things. So starting with the micro level data aspect, we collect specifically targeted individual level data. So we do this with surveys at regular intervals, as well as during crises. So we do our survey twice a year, and we've been doing it since 2021. So we're on our about 8th round of the survey. So we aim to collect information that's concerning the secondary impacts of these different crises and how they kind of affect various aspects of individual lives. So when you think about economic downturns, we kind of try and capture the effects of that through, changes to employment, financial security, access to different resources, access to education, access to health, and now we're collecting data on food security. So the survey and all of its questions we designed in consultation with our community partners, and this helps us better understand the complex issues that New Yorkers are facing in a way that is tailored to the needs of community partners' needs and, kind of objectives. So then coming on to strategic partnerships, our survey is primarily disseminated through our community partnerships, and these are usually going to be nonprofits, community-based organizations, the kind of partners who are well positioned to hear from their communities and share the survey with them in a way that they've kind of have the trust of their communities and are able to kind of utilize that. Because ultimately community members are going to be more receptive to the survey when it comes through their trusted partners, as opposed to us as Columbia researchers. We don't really have that same trust and respect of communities to really enter their areas and kind of ask them to hand their data over to us. Again, additionally, it kind of ensures that our data is coming directly from communities and is really representative, as opposed to it being kind of that macro level or less community specific. And we try and have this data be used for government agencies who can use that targeted data and in turn develop policy and programming that is directly benefiting their constituents. And then finally, when we have finished our survey dissemination, so we usually do survey dissemination for a 2 to 3 month period, we can share those findings and that analysis that we do of the data with partner organizations, with local leaders, and with city officials. And partners can also aid in the kind of sharing of findings, sharing findings with their communities and with their own partner networks. So we make this data readily available across digital platforms, as well as kind of putting reports together for journal articles, and that kind of aids government agencies, local organizations, and researchers to kind of develop targeted programs and evidence-based policy. So a little bit about our current survey, where we're at, and kind of some features of the survey. So we opened the survey
I'm sorry, John. I'm sorry. Can I just pause you for a moment, Harini?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Mr. Myrie, I'm sorry. Mr. Myrie is on, and he has a limited time frame. So I don't know if you want to just pause for a minute to let him speak and then continue with Harini.
Well, I just text
Okay.
his assistant and said something about after this. Is
Okay.
that a problem? Um,
I have until 10, and so I don't want to interrupt the flow. And Harini, sorry, please, but please keep going.
okay, good.
Okay, thank
Thanks.
you. I just don't want to hold
Yeah.
everybody up. Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you,
Sorry, Harini. Go ahead.
No, not at
Sorry,
all.
Harini. Thank you. You
No,
on
you're
a
completely
roll. Go
fine.
ahead. I'm sorry.
Oops. Okay, amazing. So survey is currently live at the moment, so we are collecting responses. We opened late April and we're planning to be open until the end of June. We have in the past sometimes extended the survey window just to collect more responses on specific communities that we haven't really found enough responses for. Since we really prioritize that kind of interdemographic analysis, we do want to get enough responses for those kind of within demographics so we can do sufficient analysis on them. So there have been times where we've extended that window, but as of right now, we're open until June 30th. The survey is completely anonymous, and all of the data that we collect through the survey is stored on secure servers. So there's no really identifying information about respondents. Respondents are able to provide their email or their phone number if they would like to be contacted in the future for future surveys, or if they would just like to stay in contact with the project. But there's no information that is collected mandatorily. The survey is also available both online and in paper. So we have the survey kind of through Qualtrics as a survey platform, but we also do have paper surveys that we disseminate at in-person events if needed. We have found that a lot of respondents and some partners really find that their communities are more comfortable with a paper survey as opposed to using their phone or their laptop to take the survey. The survey also has unique partner links. So each of our partners has a identifiable survey link. So any responses that are coming in through your specific link can be directly linked back to you. So this really helps us when we're kind of providing updates to our partners at regular intervals, just like this is how many responses you've collected, this is the kind of communities that are represented, and it kind of bolsters action kind of going down the line in terms of we want to get more responses through a different dissemination method and other things like that. So it kind of helps us throughout the survey window to kind of think about how we want to maybe redirect response collection. And then ultimately, once we've finished collecting responses, we're able to kind of come back to you and provide you a really in-depth breakdown of the kind of responses that you've been able to get. And you're able to use that maybe with sharing it with your community or with, how you kind of go about your programming or other things like that. We also have the survey in a couple other languages in addition to English. So we have it in both Spanish and Mandarin. And again, this is available both in the online survey and in our in-paper surveys. And the final feature about our survey is that we have a topical section. So usually most of the survey tries to stay mostly consistent so that we're able to longitudinally look at the survey data. But every round, we do have a section of the survey that is unique to that survey round, and it kind of focuses on one topical issue that's really relevant to the city at the moment. So right now we're focusing on food insecurity. So we have a series of questions that are dedicated to thinking about access to food, affording food, proximity to food, and the kinds of foods that people are able to access. And we're really trying to think about access to healthy food and having a healthy diet, and what kind of are the barriers to having a healthy diet and things like that. So we've kind of reworked that section a lot to include a lot of different questions and do a lot of analysis that we think is really important to the city at the moment. But those are some features of the survey. And then the final thing I just want to talk about really quickly is how our partners are involved ultimately in the survey process. So to start, I will just say that we provide a personalized partner package for each of our partners. And this package includes some QR code flyers that you can kind of have displayed in person or you can hand out in person. We also include some social media templates and graphics, as well as some language for social media dissemination. And then we also have a lot of different templates for newsletters and for emails. So just like very standardized language for those kind of newsletter blasts and things like that. But we are also able to provide more personalized materials if needed at any point. But there are a few different ways that you can potentially be sharing the survey. So there's obviously social media, just sharing those social media templates and graphics that we're providing. If you have any in-person kind of regular programming, where you have community members coming in or you're having in-person communication with community members. Our team members do often come in person to kind of talk to communities and disseminate the survey in person and kind of answer any questions that they might have through the process. There's also obviously your newsletter and your email, kind of just sending a blast to your newsletter members with the languages that we provide. You could also some partners do organize kind of events specifically around the survey where they kind of provide information about the survey and share that with your network and your partners. There's also those QR code flyers that I mentioned, which you can kind of have displayed or just hand out to members. And then finally, there's just using your website, putting up a blurb or a banner that just encourages visitors to take the survey. But that is just kind of a really quick run through of the survey basics and kind of what it does and what our partners do, most importantly. There's an email address that you can contact if you have any questions or if you'd like to talk more about this. And obviously, if you're interested in the survey QR code, which you're able to take, or I'm able to send that to anyone who's interested to just look through the survey or look through the paper version. But yeah, I'm happy to take any questions as well, depending on how much time we have. But again, thank you so much for giving me the time to talk you through this.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you. And we've always appreciated being involved with you. And it looks like you're really kind of tight with the organization too, organization level. And I can see many ways we can work with you on. This might be good for to take over to NICHIP in particular too, and of course the elderly at Encore, and we fill up. We do a lot in the food to kind of alleviate the food insecurity, and so this is very important to us. We take a lot of food and pack it in with the community cupboard and take it over to Encore, and be excellent places for the survey to connect with those folks. So any questions at all? You want to take this slide down?
Oh, let me do that. Yeah.
So we can, yeah.
Oh, there we go. Yeah.
Perfect. And then any questions for Harini?
I just want to know, hi Harini, thank you so much. I really want to know how so after the survey is done, how is that effective in engaging I guess the powers that be?
What?
Oh, oops.
Luana, that was it, right? Yeah.
How the survey is taken into effect with our elected officials and so on and so forth. I mean, after you do the survey, what's the results?
Absolutely. So we do, in terms of elected officials, we do work directly with city council members. So city council members are involved with the survey dissemination. So that kind of helps us with getting those specific responses from constituents. But once the survey, is completed and we have the results, we kind of put that together really quickly into kind of infographics, one-pagers, kind of quick little materials that we can use for just kind of sharing results. And those we're going to share back with our partner organizations. We're going to share with local leaders. We're going to share with those city council members. And then in turn, those kind of everyone is able to, within their own means, kind of share those results with, be it their community members, be it their constituents, be it at a larger scale. We've had we've done presentations for city council, or we've kind of done like speeches and presentations, and we do published reports, usually 1 to 2 a year, on specific issues. So last year we did a couple reports on childcare and on food insecurity. And those kind of reports do ultimately get published and become more accessible in terms of data on these issues. And yeah, ultimately we use all of this in our framework to also inform other cities, and we are trying to kind of get this framework up and running in other cities in the country so that they can disseminate the survey within their own means and kind of get that same kind of policy actionability at the end of it.
Great. Nice work, Harini. Really nice work.
Thank you so much.
I hope you stay with us.
Absolutely.
I'm going to let me just kind of remove your pin. I'm going to move on to Zelnor, and I think he said he had until 10 o'clock, and it's time's running out here. Zelnor, uh,
Uh,
the f- the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, John, and apologies for interrupting what seemed to be a really good presentation, and thank you, Ms. Green, as well, for giving me the opportunity. Thank you for having me. As many of you already know, I'm running to be the next mayor of New York City, but wanted to come before you to introduce myself as someone who was born and raised in this city, whose parents came here about 50 years ago from Costa Rica. They worked in factories when they got here, sent me to public schools in Brooklyn. I went to PS 161, then Brooklyn Tech for high school, ultimately Fordham University for undergrad and grad school, and then I went to Cornell for law school. I was able to be a lawyer at one of the most prestigious law firms in the world, and then ran for state senate in the same neighborhoods that my parents came to. And that is the New York City story, that people come here for opportunity. They come here to put food on the table. They come here to put their family on the path to success. And that same opportunity feels like it's slipping away for too many New Yorkers. I was recently married a little over a year and a half ago. My wife went to the same elementary school that I did. And, we're trying to put down roots in the same neighborhood that we grew up in, but it feels out of reach. The average cost of a home is $1 million. You look across the city, the average cost of rent is $4,000. Want to expand your family? The average cost of childcare is about $20,000 per kid per year. And instead of having a city hall that is solely focused on solving those problems, making our city more affordable and more livable, I don't have to tell you what we've been getting. I don't have to spend much time talking about the current administration. I really want to talk to you about the kind of city that I want to lead. A city where, yes, we have childcare and we have universal pre-K and 3K, but why does it end at 2:30 p.m.? Most New Yorkers do not get off at 2:30 p.m. So I want to extend pre-K and 3K to 6 p.m. And I was also the beneficiary of an after-school program. It gave my mom some peace of mind. She could continue to work and put food on the table, but also I was in a safe place. I was off the streets. I was on the step team. I was learning karate, even though I wasn't too good at it. But it helped build my confidence and help put me on a real path to success. I think every kid in this city from age 3 to grade 12 should have after school, and that's what I want to get done as the next mayor. And as we think about what we're doing around public safety, I think it's important. I take the train every single day. I've been taking public transit my whole life here. It is part of what makes us New York, but things feel different on our subways and on our streets. And we have New Yorkers that are suffering, that are not getting the help that they need and that they deserve. We have to put people not just in Rikers where they get worse or in the emergency room where they cycle out after a couple of days, but let's build on the clubhouse model. Let's have stabilization centers where people can get the proper diagnosis, the help that they need, and get put into permanent housing. We know, I don't have to tell this committee, that homelessness is a housing problem. And instead of the city focusing much of its capital on building new shelters, we should be building permanent housing that has the supportive resources that people need. And look, I represented Brownsville in the state senate for 4 years. I had 23 public housing developments in my district. I used to go to those TA meetings. I would be yelling at NYCHA to make the repairs. And one of the most egregious examples of NYCHA failing was developments in my district that would go months without gas, and that would be forced to buy food. It was disgraceful. And so I wrote a bill that said when the gas is out, that NYCHA, the utility companies, the city, everyone has to work expeditiously to get these repairs done. That law went into effect a couple of months ago, and that is a law that I plan to be enforcing very vigorously as the mayor. I have been very urgent and paid attention to detail in my role as a state senator, and I plan to bring that same energy in this moment. Look, we're facing an existential crisis from the federal administration. We just learned a couple of days ago, as I'm sure all of you were much more astute on, that the potential cuts as proposed by this bill making its way through the House and the Senate would have disastrous impacts for our NYCHA residents across the city. We're talking close to 300,000 people that might be under threat for either losing Section 8 or being threatened by the new requirements. We need a mayor that's going to have a backbone and some courage to stand up to this administration. I've released a front frontline agenda where I'm going to be using the 10th Amendment. I'm hiring 50 more lawyers for the law department so that we can go on the offense and not be in a defensive posture against Donald Trump and what he's trying to do to bully this city. So I'm hoping that over the course of the next couple of weeks, early voting starts June 14th, that we can continue to present our vision to folks. Please tune in. The first televised debate is tomorrow night at 7 p.m. It is co-sponsored by Channel 4, Telemundo, Politico. So take a look. It's going to be the first time I think all of us are going to be on the stage together. So I'm excited for the opportunity. And excited about presenting my vision to the rest of the city. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for giving me this brief moment.
Sure, Zelnor. We really appreciate you laying out what you stand for. I mean, you hit upon a lot of points that it's close to our hearts. And you brought up NYCHA, and I have a question for you. We have this battle going on front and center with the developers who want to demolish it, and it's been a horrendous and struggle for the folks who live there. They don't want their homes demolished, and we're up against a lot of officials, a lot of course, the related company, and of course, HUD even is worked with NYCHA to do this DEIS proposal, and it overlooks the fact that the people don't want the no demolition. So where do you stand on that?
Yeah, and I appreciate the question. And I've had this discussion with some of the folks on the call here. And so, more broadly, I support working in conjunction with the residents for the development of mixed income on some of our NYCHA properties. I think that it is an opportunity to bring in much needed revenue because in both Democratic and Republican administrations on the local level, state level, federal level, NYCHA has not gotten the resources that it needs to get. But what I understand from this process is that the residents were not truly engaged and that there were some real faults in how that process was played out. And as someone who chaired the elections committee for over 6 years, how democracy is done, both big and little d, to me is really, really important. And if that process was not transparent, if that process did not truly engage the residents, then I think that there should be questions about the outcome.
And one of our members here has a question. If you can handle one more question, I'd appreciate that. I know you're in a hurry. Leonard?
Thank you. Zelnor, thanks. We met at Penn South, I think, when you came here to speak to a bunch of cooperators. My question is, we are, as a group, kind of opposed to the City of Yes because of the kind of what it appears to be is a giveaway to developers. And the other underlying question that we are really confronting is the fact that the rents keep going up regardless of the number of new buildings that are built. And that rent control, which was very strong before Governor Pataki kind of riddled it with vacancy decontrol, is what we have to get back to. And we'd like to know how you feel about that.
Yeah, so thank you, Leonard, and good to see you again. I am very proud that I ran for the state Senate in 2018, primarily because our rent regulation laws were up for renewal in 2019. And for a really long time, the tenants got the short end of those renewals. And there were things like vacancy decontrol and other tools that were being misproperly used to get tenants out. I grew up in a rent stabilized apartment. My mom still lives in a rent stabilized apartment. And I represent many thousands of rent stabilized tenants now. And so I was a leader in 2019 on the Housing Stability and Tenant Protection Act that got rid of things like vacancy decontrol and that saw in its immediate wake a significant drop in evictions. I think as mayor, we have to do a couple of things. One, I'd like to see more resources for our Right to Counsel program. Right now, it is not fully funded, and the tenants who are facing eviction are still not being fully helped. So I'd like to fully fund that. I'd like to extend it to homeowners who are facing deed theft and who are facing foreclosure. So I think we are in alignment there. I don't think we are in alignment on City of Yes, and that's okay. This is why it's important for us to have the conversation. I do think that we need to add more supply, but it has to be equally spread out. And what I have seen in my own Senate district where I grew up was that on the east side of the district, there have been many developments over the past 10 years, close to 4,000 units added. But on certain parts of the west side of Prospect Park, that number is in the low 100s. And so that when there was proposed development on that side, I supported it because I thought, listen, we all need to do our part here. And I was met with a lot of resistance, and people told me, well, I can't step foot in this neighborhood if I support the development, which I stood firmly against. I think that we can help lessen the impacts of people being pushed out if we are doing this in a more spread out manner. And I also believe that we have to have a focus on affordability. My plan to deliver 1 million homes over the next 10 years includes 300,000 of preservation to ensure that the people who have affordable housing now, including our rent regulated portfolio, can stay there. And within the creation of 700,000 more, that half of those be affordable housing. I think that it really has to be a focus, but we need an all of the above approach in this moment. And that's the approach that I plan to take.
Great.
Thank you.
And one more, if you would.
I really do have to run. I really do have to
Okay.
run. I'm so
Senator,
sorry.
Senator,
Yeah.
before you leave, make sure that in that forum tomorrow, you distinguish yourself as somebody who will support the people in Section 9. Whatever you have said so far has not convinced me. So please do every single effort to stand up for the Section 9 people. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
Great. That's a good advice, I think.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks,
Everybody.
Zelnor. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Great.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome.
That was great.
Yeah. Let me drop this, go back to our okay. Andre, are you here? I saw you pop in and out a little bit. Andre?
Yeah, he was having trouble. I don't know. He kept coming in and out. Maybe he's having trouble with his computer.
Okay. Viren, are you here?
Yes,
Yeah,
I'm
he's here.
Great. Okay. So we'll go to our next agenda item then, the Midtown Mixed-Use Plan. Viren, I'm afraid to say your last name, Brahmbhatt?
just the way it reads.
I'm sorry?
Just the way it reads, Brahmbhatt.
Brahmbhatt. Okay. All right. I've been afraid to say that name.
No,
I
no, no,
didn't want to
okay.
butcher it.
No, it's been butchered a few times. No worries at all.
All right. Glad to have you, Viren. And the floor is yours. I'm going to let you speak. You want some, you had a slide presentation, correct?
I could do it. I could do without it, depending on how much time we have.
Hey, the floor is yours.
Okay.
I'm giving you ample space here.
All right.
Let me
Sounds
find
good.
it. I'll give you co-host, and you can pop up your slide if you will.
Okay, just to introduce myself, I'm an architect and designer. I live in Chelsea. I have actually lived in, just realized before speaking today that it's been probably 27 years that I have lived in Chelsea. And prior to that, I lived on the east side, the other end of 28th Street, near Gramercy, 2nd Avenue side. Like I said, I'm an architect. I was born somewhere else. I was born in UK. Of Indian origin. I have lived across the globe for many, many years. Lived in India for about, I would say, 6 to 7 years, and with my grandmother, because she was my second best school that I ever went to. And that was something that was important to me. Here, what I do is I have a small practice. I do housing. I do pretty intriguing sort of set of work. As an urban designer, I also work globally. So I have projects in South Korea. I have projects in South America, a few of them, mostly focused on housing and community spaces. I also have had sort of an opportunity to work with New York City Housing Authority some years ago. And part of the reason why my engagement with NYCHA has been significantly important is due to that fact that I probably am the only person in this room who's been to every single NYCHA location in New York City. And to be precise, that number would be 347. Well, it used to be 347 because many of them are now being managed privately. But at the time when I looked at it, I was a student at Pratt Institute. I've studied at Pratt, Columbia, and a little bit at Cooper Union. And I hold 3 degrees, architecture, urban design, as well as industrial design. Going back to NYCHA stuff, that was the sort of whole studio project which I was doing, which drew attention of folks in the city. And my whole argument was, how do we reweave New York City back together, particularly Lower East Side, where we have this entire giant wall of public housing along FDR. And the superblock disconnect was my whole focus. That how do we, without losing what we have, how do we add to it so you can actually literally complete the carpet of what Manhattan is all about. So before I go into MSMX, that part is significantly important because at that point in time, and this sounds like ancient history, but it's not, it's around 2007, from 2003 to 2007 is when the whole bunch of 30 projects were looked at. And what we looked at was, how do we use ample FAR that's sitting available within NYCHA sort of zones? It's publicly owned land. How do we actually utilize it for 2 things? Betterment of housing for people who live there, reestablish the connection because the streets are demapped, but they are not removed. In other sense, because the utilities run underneath, buildings were not allowed to be built above those streets, which means you have access available. And the argument that was put forward was that how do we build more affordable housing, potentially rental as well as home ownership? How do we reduce the sort of burden on existing public housing? Majority of them were built in the 50s. The ones built before then were actually much better built, like Williamsburg houses and Harlem River houses. They were much better built. Anyway, long and short of it is, that was the plan, which is where Fulton and Chelsea come into play. Because our proposal at that point in time was fairly simple. Housing units that are built this was built in 1960s, around 62. Few things that you need to know about NYCHA. And I'm sorry, I'm talking about NYCHA right now because I think it's significantly important to connect back to MSMX. The 2 projects were built at the same time as Penn South. The materiality, construction techniques, engineering, structure, everything are comparable, which means there was nothing left to imagination in terms of quality of housing, structure. Fulton, in fact, in my view, is one of those most unique NYCHA projects because it is exactly the size of Rockefeller Center. And it is not a superblock. And that's the beauty because it fits extremely well in Chelsea, in spite of the fact that 2 buildings that are much taller, they're pushed inside in the mid-block. So there was everything thought through fairly well. So architecturally, it was very well put together. Last but not the least, the entire ground floor, or the first floor, as we call it, was left open for community use. And it was true, meaning you could, from one block through to the next block, you could see through and walk through. Parking came in, parking took over a majority of those spaces. Community center was put in, and then the entire sort of look of it has changed now. Not bad, still for public housing use. Do I have a problem with it? Yes, I do have a problem with the process. And that process has been sort of hijacked by selected few. And I'm going to use the word selected few, and I'm not using the word elected few, but you know the difference. And you know who the selected few actually happen to be. Now, am I against the plan? No. Am I for the plan? No. So I'm in between. What I want to know as a professional, what it should do and should not do, and how it is done, who it is done for, and how the community is engaged. I always dislike when I speak to CB4 or anyone, when they talk about we, the community, and NYCHA. I hate that. I don't like it because NYCHA is part of the community. And please do not do that. Please do not keep saying it because you are concretizing the badly perceived notion, which is 75 years plus old. NYCHA was not built for the poor. NYCHA was not built for a few. NYCHA was not built for what people use NYCHA for warehousing people. And that happened post-50s because Robert Moses happened. Redlining happened. So then NYCHA became the container to put people that you didn't want to see anywhere else. We also forget the NYCHA was put on sites, which happened to be waterfront sites, very remarkable sites now. Everyone loves it. Even Donald Trump wanted to buy Smith houses right next to Brooklyn Bridge. And you don't blame him for it because who wouldn't? The point is, that time, those properties were considered to be not desirable. Contamination was high. There were brownfields. So everybody poor was pushed to the edge, literally and metaphorically. Anyway, the long and short of it is we have to understand that the socioeconomics change, our priorities change, our desires change. So any land that is available where we can build, we want to grab it. Somebody said 300,000 public housing tenants. That's not entirely true. The original number used to be 800,000 public housing folks. A lot of it is because of doubling up. The official number was always lower, but we know that families live together. So it might be registered to 1 or 2 people, but there might be 4 people living there. So that fact has to be always kept in mind because of large percentage of homelessness in New York City. That actually is helping solve that problem a little bit. Is it the best case scenario? Not at all. But is it a worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is people hanging out on the sidewalks, not getting healthcare, not getting food. That is the worst case scenario in my book. So having said all of that, I'm going to come back to you and say why MSMX is important and how it ties into NYCHA. NYCHA is the only land available in New York City where developers have their eyes on 2 reasons. It's most desirable, it's closer to waterfronts, majority of them, and there is no other place to go, meaning there's no other land where they could build. So there are 3 things happening in Chelsea and Hell's Kitchen. Are they good? Yes. Are they bad? They could be, depending on how they do it. So process is where my focus is going to be. MSMX is one of this large rezoning project. NYCHA is the other one. Hudson Yards expansion is the third one. Casino is happening, conversation going on across Midtown, South Midtown, and Chelsea House Kitchen is significantly important as well because we are practically hijacking the whole conversation, which goes against the grain of how the city is put together. Now, if I sound academic, you have to forgive me for that. New York City is a very crazy example. One of my old teachers, whom I never got a chance to meet, but I read her books, Sybil Mohily-Nagy, when she was at Pratt, somebody asked her this question: what do you have to say about Manhattan? And she said, if you put a loaf of bread on dining table, what do? You slice it up and you pretend it's equal. But who gets the end pieces will always complain. And I think that's a great analogy. Manhattan, literally, is a sliced loaf of bread. Avenues and streets, north and south, east and west. It has been looked at as nothing more than real estate property. Even our plan basically is reflective of the same mentality. We come, we take over, we grab, we break it up. You run, whatever you grab is yours, but do it in a manner in which we can control you. So that is why the rational plan is beautifully done, amazingly done, but it's not done by the people who actually sliced it up. It's done by the people who are in this room and people who live here. They have changed it. They have altered it. They have made it their own. Somebody might say, when I first came here, first title of my project that I did, even for the NYCHA location, the title was, Whose City Is It Anyways? That was the title of that project. And the reason why, I was an outsider then. And I realized that everyone relates to this place in different ways. Many people come in from outside. At least 1 million people come in and out of the city every single working day. Manhattan's population shrinks at night, expands during the day. That makes Manhattan very important. The changes make it very important. And I'm going to quote two architects, and then I'm going to go into my MSMX situation. Corbusier, years ago, when he was dying to work in New York City. Le Corbusier was a French architect. I have a lot of respect for him for his sort of theories and his ideas. But when he looked at Brooklyn Bridge, he said, why can't they get rid of old when they do something so remarkably new? And I love that statement because he loved Brooklyn Bridge. He didn't like the arches much, but he liked the suspension bridge, and sort of keeping up with technology was quite remarkable. But he said, I love it. I love it because New York has the capacity to keep both together. And the other architect that I love the statement from is Aldo Rossi, the Italian architect who also died. And he wrote a book called Architecture of the City. In one of his introduction, he says, New York is a city of monuments. And I said, why would this architect, who's a modernist, who doesn't design monuments, why would he call New York City a city of monuments? And I read through it, and I recognized the grid is the monument. The rational grid that exists and remains as the footprint is the monument. And every change that plays out against it is always remarkably important. So that monumentality is what we are dealing with. So I'm now going to come to MSMX very quickly. Let me see if I can share screen, which then I will. 1 second.
You do have control.
Okay, perfect. Can you see it?
It's coming up. It needs to be a little bigger.
Yeah, I will do that. I'm just trying to get to it. Okay, so
Perfect.
I thought I would not take too much of everyone's time. So I'm just going to look at what is good, what is not good. So what is good? Densification with purpose, good. High density zoning, 1518. Near transit hub, smart. Does it work? Can. How you do it matters the most. Verticality is not necessarily definition of high density. You can have high density and low rise development. You can also cannibalize some of the existing buildings, and you can do it extremely differently. And New York actually invented that. 65% of New York City's building stock is existing. And that is something good because they can't get rid of it mainly because if they get rid of it, they can't put back what they give away. And that is also a good situation that New York City is in. Mixed use activation, extremely important. Does it matter? Matters a lot, a whole lot. If you walk through Fashion District, if you walk from 7th Avenue up to Times Square, you will see New York City unfold right in front of your eyes. It is mixed use. It's one of those places which is remarkable. Does it die some places? Yes. When you walk along Broadway, over the weekend, you will recognize that it becomes kind of a dead place because nothing happens, nobody comes, nobody goes, except Broadway has become rejuvenated and people can walk around and bike around and whatnot. And that is remarkably important. Harrow Square and Times Square changed the entire sort of perception that people have. Affordable housing incentives, extremely good. 30% of projected 9,700 units and permanently affordable is meaningful. But is it really meaningful? And your group will be asking this question. The affordability is defined, permanently affordable is defined as 80% of the AMI. If I made 80% of AMI, am I looking for affordable housing incentives? No. I can get a loan. I can buy it. I can get a mortgage without any difficulty because 80% of AMI is way too high for many people who live here and work here. So affordability is always closely aligned with affordable for who rather than affordable for all. So that is one major significant question that I have. Public realm as a lever. Yeah. POPs and everything else will work beautifully. The density bonuses for public amenities are always good. And is that a good thing? Of course, it's a good thing. But the other questions must be answered. What is affordability level? How is it defined? How is it sort of for reduced AMI, meaning 50% or below 50%? How do you take care of it? What provisions have you made for people who live outdoors because they don't have anything anywhere else to go. Somebody said that homelessness is a housing issue. No, it's also housing and health issue. In fact, housing and health should always be tied together because homelessness is not a disease. Homelessness is not a problem. It is a condition, and it's a socioeconomic condition, as much as it is people's disability in terms of meeting the need that they must meet. I'm going to go to the next slide, which is what is flawed. Generic density without design guidance, huge problem. FAR increase, big problem. Mixed use is a great solution. People are in community board, when I worked there, they would argue with me that why more than 12 FAR is a problem. And I don't say it's a problem. You want to call it mixed use, you want to convert all office buildings that go up to 18, 20, 25, 30 FAR, then you're taking away the mixed use. What I'm saying is, can you go only up to what is allowed? Up to 12, that's allowed, maybe. But beyond that, it remains mixed use. It remains community and social amenities and schools and daycares and whatever you have to do. It's a design problem. It's not simply a mathematical problem. And I think when I say design problem, I don't mean it's a problem to be solved by architects and urban designers. It's a problem that has to be solved collectively by people working with who can actually draw it up for them. So I think drawing is seeing. That's exactly what my argument would be. The loft character is at risk, which people should know a lot more about than I do in this place. If this can happen in Soho, it cannot happen here in the same manner because we will lose whatever little potential that is left for us to sort of cash on. I'm not a preservationist. I'm not a landmarks person, but the historic fabric of the city matters. I gave you the example. I went and lived with my granny for 6-7 years. The most I have ever learned is because of her knowledge, because she knew a lot more than anyone or any school taught me. I teach at Columbia University. I taught at Pat. I'm teaching at City College now. And one student asked me, which schools have you been to? Which of the 3 schools that you went to, which is the best? I said, well, I'll tell you, there are 2 schools that I haven't actually literally gone to. One is my grandmother, and second best school I've gone to is New York City, because I have learned such a lot from this city that we should learn from too. There are all the sort of technical issues with overshadowing of light and exposure to sky, infrastructure stress, percentage of budget that's not been put aside. They're actually cashing on what's already been invested in, but they're not investing more to expand it, to make it better. The community issues, you already know more, so I don't have to tell you a lot more about it. But someone who lives here and has lived here and walked, I have literally lived more than half my life here. I came here when I was a student. I did my architecture school here. So you can imagine, I came here in my 20s. So I have practically grown up here more than any other place. Stronger design controls, sunlight studies, adaptive reuse, all of that is significantly important. I can go on, but I'm going to stop here. And if there are any questions, then I can pull up some more information. But the point that I'm going to make, last point, I like the messy nature of Midtown South. I like the hybridity of it. I like the openness of it. I like the scale of it. I like something that can keep growing, something that is related to how people work and how people can work. Light manufacturing is required. We have pushed manufacturing out of the city in a remarkable way. We have created giant waterfronts and bike paths and whatever have you. Are they important? Significantly important. Extremely important. But we also have to keep a place where industrial, I don't mean industrial in terms of contamination type of sort of industry, but light industry, where people make things by hand, arts, incubation centers, data centers, where people can collectively come together and work. Density, absolutely. How you do it, where do you do it? That is one part of the problem, a question that they must answer. And I'm going to go back to this messy urbanism idea that I really completely adore. Let me see if I can pull that up and I can without making any mistake, I can read that quickly for you. Just a second. And John, stop me if I'm going overboard.
No, go right, keep going.
Okay, I'm going to see if I can. There you go. So one of the arguments that I make is that how do you retain hybrid mixed use character? How do you keep it? How do you use zoning that kind of can remain in place? How can you tweak zoning rather than completely rezone the entire 42 blocks swath? That's a very giant swath. It's not small. How do you maintain that? And one of the things that I wanted to talk about is might sound a bit more academic to you, but I'm going to still say it. There was an architect, I mean, he is still there, Raim Kulas, who wrote a book, an amazing book. It's called Delirious New York. And he called it delirious because he described in a talk that I attended as a student years ago. And he said, there are very few cities that do what New York does. You can go downtown, you walk along the street, and you will find a funeral home. Right next to funeral home is an amazing coffee shop. Right above that is a little gym. Right above that, you actually got offices. And you keep going. The use changes, the building remains the same. The fabric is loaded with hybridity, deliriously. And that is something that we should really focus on, because that is the cultural trait of New York City that not many cities have, except cities in South Asia and Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Indonesia, and other places, where this is the norm because of scarcity of resources. But here we have something similar. Yes, we are rich. Yes, we have we have an amazing city, but we have scarcity as well. And scarcity of resources ties back into climate change and sustainability. So how do you maintain our district, which has fashion industry, education, retail, malls, you name it, every single typology lives there. How do we can make it remain at the same time, become denser while providing much needed housing without losing the quality of life character? So I'm going to stop here and take any questions if you have. And if I need to show you what, I'm not showing you stuff that you already have seen. You've seen there's a lot of good stuff in there that is worth looking. In fact, I'm going to show some of it very quickly because they have some good images. So I didn't want to sort of take it away, talk too much about it, but I'm going to show you. 1 second. Trying to find, oh yeah, there it is. This plan, the reason why I'm showing you is not, 1 second, I'm trying to get rid of this. Sorry, pardon me, but the images that I wanted to show you.
Was this a mixed-use plan, or was this
Yes,
your
the images that I wanted to show you is what I'm looking for, and I can't find them right now. Anyway, you know the neighborhood. You've walked through it. You got the flower shops. You got the fashion folks working through it. You know the neighborhood. I don't have to show it to you, so I'm going to not waste too much time. We're getting closer to 11, so I'm just trying to keep it simple.
Great. Wonderful, Viren. Really wonderful. I'm so pleased that you're here. And I want you to involve with this other meeting with Chris Marte too. I think we need to have you involved with that presentation as well. That's coming up next month, I think. Any questions? Anybody want to start off with any questions? Lynn, go right ahead.
Viren, thank you for the presentation, and I am very curious, based on your history with the New York City Housing Authority, can you zero in on the questions that have come up concerning the Fulton Chelsea Elliott houses about the alternative and the feasibility of the alternative to renovate the buildings as opposed to the demolition of the 24 buildings and reconstruction of 15. What would be your approach if you could put together a different approach that involves renovation?
It's a very sort of, it's a multi-layered question. I've looked at it. Initially, when I had made that proposal was done for a slightly different purpose. If you keep all the buildings, let's say, I will talk about Fulton, at least for once right now. I mean, both it applies to both, but Fulton a little bit more, mainly because it has a little more room to build. So if you keep all the buildings and if you build infill housing around, and if you expand the 6-story building and make them taller, which you can, because potentially it is possible to do that, you could very easily build 700 to 1,000 more units, depending on how you do it. Now, if you come back and say, you know what, I'm going to go with high density and I'm going to get rid of some of the one or two, whatever number of buildings, but I'm going to build higher density there, that number can change. Can you get the same number of units that they are proposing? No, you cannot. Because for that, you'll have to do substantial damage. Now, flipping that question, can I get same number of units with a different plan? The answer is yes. So depending on how you approach it, do nothing will give you up to 700 to 1,000 or 1,200 units, depending on how much you do there. Right now, the tall building is, I think, roughly about 25-story tall. The two top buildings that are in the mid-block. Right. Yeah. But if you say all the building on the perimeter, if you remove them and you make them high density, typical New York City, there's nothing new about it, like the Cushman row, but it'll be a little taller than that. It'll be, I don't know, 18-story tall, maybe 20-story tall. Can you get something substantial? London Terrace is an example that will tell you what you can and cannot do. So if you look up London Terrace, that's a high density, not very tall building. Is it the most desirable? No. But that gives you an idea in terms of, the possibilities. Is the plan asking for something good? There's always something good, right? When something new is being done, that's okay. But how do you do it? How do you engage people? How do you make them own it? How do you distribute the square feet? If my argument is very simple, for example, so I'm switching now. Okay, I hope I answered your question. But you see, that question is something that changes in the manner in which you look at it. But if you don't show that to the community, and then you come back and with a rubber stamp and say tall is beautiful. Of course it's beautiful because it gives you views of Hudson River. Of course, pushing tall buildings towards 10th Avenue makes sense because then you personally own Highline and you own the views. Pushing nicer people into one building, of course it makes sense because New York City has done that. Warehousing the poor. Exactly what they want to do. So these are the questions and these are the problems that we have. And my question has always been process. Please engage both and make no distinction between NYCHA and the rest of the community. No, NYCHA is the community and rest of the community is NYCHA. In other words, it's part of the same fabric, same district. A lot of people in this community do not like NYCHA. They think they don't like NYCHA. They don't like the buildings. They don't like the look of it. There's so much in New York City I don't like, right? But it's here and it can be fixed. And that's what I mean when every time I say it's a design problem. What I mean is you don't always have to get rid of it. There's a way in which you can fix things. I hope I've answered your question.
Yeah, I agree with that. There's ways to fix things. And one of the fellows we've had here on our meetings is Goldstein, and he's doing a project upstate. And basically he's putting sleeves on a building. And you know about this, it seems. Yeah, okay. I've always said, you know, they need to find other places to build. If they can't, they need to spread out. I mean, this property is very valuable for health reasons, the green spaces, and I get incensed by the idea that they can decide to build up some luxury towers or affordable. The term they use, affordable. They bastardize that term. So I have a serious problem with the idea of instead of trying to fill these land, trying to fill the space and trying to move, uh, like you said, you opened up really well with the how valuable it is, and they see this and that there's really nothing else to build, and they've said this themselves. I've seen Simon in a meeting, one of the fellows from, I think it was NYCHA or related, I can't remember which. I mean, they're desperately looking to grab this land. So I see it as our purpose is to defend this property, and also, like we talked about, yeah, there's lots of ways to attack the issue, but right now we're not protecting the rent controlled people, the rent stabilized people, the people, the public housing. We're not protecting them, and they don't want to protect them. So that's my issue, and I think you open up that way, and then you start to talk about other ways of building on it. So how do you, it seems a little contradictory to me.
Yeah, John, one of the things that I would say, there are two ways of looking at it, right? One is we give it away for the land grabbers. They want to actually build tall, build for the rich, make a lot of money. 30% is given back to NYCHA. 70% is grabbed by the rich and the affluent. Market rate housing is being talked about. 80% of AMI, affordability, is being talked about. Now, that basically is a very different set of people who would actually occupy those spaces, right? So that's one way of doing it. And then you collect a bunch of money, right? Now, NYCHA, let's say, for example, 1 million square feet is what NYCHA has right now. For example, they're right sizing units, which means they're shrinking that 1 million to whatever number that might be. What happens to the rest of it? That is lost. So if we move forward with their plans, say, for example, so that's one argument. Give me back what you're taking away. Don't take it away. Increase that component. Add more Section 8 or whatever you want to call it. It's project-based Section 8. There are some protections in place. Section 8 money is going to disappear too, and it's going to affect this new Section 8, even if it is project-based. It comes with protections, but doesn't, how do I say it? It doesn't put you in a sleeve that no one can increase your rent. So it doesn't give you that protection that Section 9 gives you. So that's another problem. If you give back that, let's say, 250,000 square feet, and if that becomes additional housing similar to NYCHA folks, you're at least getting something back. So that's one way of looking at it. Third thing that I'm going to put on table, the second idea that I'm going to put on table, going back with what I originally had done, was look at Fulton houses and Chelsea Elliott and other places where we keep everything the way you have it, build this 1,200 units or 1,000 units or whatever we have, build it for affordability. Because affordable housing, there are no sites left. The only place where we can talk about, I mean literally affordable, housing where people actually can't easily find housing. We do that only. Instead of spending $2 billion, we spend $500 million to fix the buildings up. And we spend another $500 million to do this infill housing, where we provide high level of affordability, and whether it remains rental affordable or even home ownership, that's a separate conversation. But you do that. Now, would you be better off doing it? Because you can combine very many social programs in it. So in other words, we can go back to the city and say, you don't have any other place to put these people. There are many people looking for housing. The new immigrants have come in. The people are homeless. There's supportive housing that is required. And yes, Chelsea and House Kitchen are doing an amazing job by increasing the housing stock. but the affordability level is not meeting the sort of mid to lower range of people. So how do we do this that is collectively extremely helpful and is designed to balance but not to tip one way or the other? Does that make sense? So let's
Yes.
not build entirely for the rich and let's not build entirely for the poor, but find the middle ground. And one more quick thing that I don't know if you know, but if you look at data, rental housing is actually extremely hard to find in New York City.
Oh, yeah.
And we keep talking about housing as if everyone must own, but New York City is a kind of big giant recycling bin. People come and go, people find their footings, but they have to have a place where they can find their footing. And I think that's where rental approach is something that we should focus a bit more attention to.
Lawana, you.
Okay, thank you so much, John. Thank you, Viren. There were so many things that you said, and I just it's just a little bit overwhelming for me. But some of the things you said I agree with, and some of the things you said I kind of disagree with, and we can agree to disagree. But one of the things I identify with is I was raised by my great grandmother. And as you were saying about learning, I learned a lot from her, and I learned a lot from living in New York City. One of the things about the NYCHA situation is that there's a misconception about NYCHA and NYCHA residents, and about how they're drug addicts, poor on welfare, and so on and so forth. And I grew up in NYCHA. I lived in NYCHA for over 40 years. And when I moved into NYCHA in 1970, there were working intact families. My great grandmother, as a matter of fact, was one of the first residents, her and her husband. Her husband used to work for the Housing Authority. We had a police department on scene. We had, you know, the local police, the neighborhood policing. We had all of that stuff. We had community centers and so on and so forth. We had so much stuff going on. And once Mayor Dinkins, to his discredit, opened the shelters and moved people in, it changed. The people were not vetted. The people were not, you know, looked at in terms of their housing and how they lived in the shelters. And not that anybody lives in a shelter is, you know, bad, but there were situations that came into NYCHA that helped it decline. So what I want to say is, you talked about the housing issue and the density, and there's a lack of housing. And I think that's a misconception. If you walk all along New York City, you will see housing going up everywhere in this city, at least down here. And a lot of the housing that's going up is a lot of hotels. They're not really housing for the residents. They're housing for people who are temporary, who are transient, right? That's one of the things. If you look at these tall buildings, half of them are empty, the lights are out. And if you think about how many homeless people can fit in one of these tall buildings, I mean, it would be immense. I don't think there's a housing shortage. I think that's a misconception. I think there's a affordability shortage for sure, because every time you build these large developments or large luxury housing, you change the AMI in the area. And when you change the AMI in the area, you change the population. So you what do you say? You move out a certain population and you move in a certain population, which change the whole demographics of the neighborhood. So that's one of the things that I think also we should work on, is how do we change the situation with the AMI? The other thing that you stated, this plan that they have, I didn't see that you mentioned that. You mentioned about the subways and the infrastructure, sanitation, and so on and so forth, but you didn't mention about they planning when the developments, the housing developments were built, they were built to take in the effect, the way they were built, the architectural design, were to take into effect the open space, the sunlight, and the views, so that there can be proper ventilation, that there can be proper sunlight, and that people would have a view. The plan is to infill these open spaces, take away the greenery. So everything that the design team for NYCHA had planned in the beginning for why NYCHA is built the way they are, is now proposed to be taken away, right? So you want to fill the buildings with more buildings, less open space, less light, less air, and environmentally not sound. So that's why, and no hospitals, no schools are proposed. None of that stuff is proposed. The other
Luana,
thing, yeah. So I
let's,
just wanted to say that some of the plan that you stated is really good, and some of it I think needs to continue to work. There is not a shortage of housing in New York City. There's a shortage of affordability. So that's
yeah.
fine. Thank you.
Viren, can you comment on those? I think those are great points.
They're great points. Lorna, one of the quick things I think I speak very fast, and I've been told that before. When I say there is not enough housing, I didn't mean that there isn't enough housing. There is a proposal that I put forward to City Councilman, which he didn't take it further, was the vacancy tax issue. Right behind me, I live in Chelsea, right behind me, there's an 11-story building which has only 25% of the units occupied since 2011. So you can imagine, these many years, lights come and go off every now and then, you can tell. There are very many buildings with a lot of housing in which is not occupied. There is housing. Occupancy is the problem. Second, but there isn't enough housing for the lower and middle income groups. There isn't enough housing that is affordable. And I think that's what I meant when I said we have a housing need. When Mayor talks about 165,000 units required or 20,000 units required in this borough or whatever, they are speaking at a larger number. There's another thing that you have to understand. Community boards actually work towards increasing the AMI by actually, even when there's for example, an MTA site in House Kitchen that came up for affordable housing, they wanted the AMI to be higher. And I actually spoke in one of the Zoom meetings. And I said, no, the AMI has to be lower than 50. It should go all the way down to 30. And that is very hard to achieve because there's a community board, and I understand that. I live here. I understand the community wants to kind of change their profile. They do not want to actually push the AMI down because their perception is poor people, just the way you said, the stigma, the poor people can be criminal. Poor people can bring this and bring that. That is just a perception, right? And Niger has suffered from that perception. So yes, there is a kind of built-in, John, you would appreciate this a lot more. There is a built-in issue with the way zoning and housing politics is designed in New York City to get weaponized. Even zoning is a weapon. I mean, you should read the book called Color of Law if you ever get a chance to read it.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up. We've been talking to Rothstein for a while now. We're going to do a forum with him.
Please do. He's a remarkable guy.
Yes.
And look up his name and you'll find a lot of videos. And it's a very significant book because when you think about, my students ask these questions very often. Why only Midtown has a higher FAR? Why Brooklyn doesn't have a higher FAR? Why certain neighborhoods don't have a higher FAR? Atlantic Yards, it took them ages to sort of capitalize on it. Mostly heavily invested infrastructure places in Queens, Brooklyn, Bronx, they were underutilized for a very, very long time because political tools would make sure that the good things happen in particular places. So we actually divide by design and we displace by design. And that is exactly what the 3Ds actually stand for. Democracy is not part of those 3Ds. So keep that in mind as well. And that is the problem. We talk about more than 60 years old zoning laws, but we forget that those zoning laws were designed by people who had a very different mindset.
Yeah.
And they had very different constituents in mind. Constituents have changed, people have changed, demographics have changed, and that must play a role in how the laws are designed. So we're not in disagreement actually, we're agreeing with each other. But only difference is that, yes, I didn't qualify what I meant by housing is not enough.
Do you,
Thank
the
you.
CB, when you said something about the CB is trying to up the AMI, is that just with CB4, or is that across the board?
It's happening in majority of community boards, but CB4 actually has a slightly better reputation because they do believe in affordable housing, and I kind of like it. But affordability definition is problematic. And board is comprising of 50 members, and depending on whose voice is louder, pushes the cart. So that happens more often than not. The only time we can win back is when there's public land involved. And that is exactly what I keep saying, that New York City's public land, publicly owned land, is a giant resource that housing advocacy groups can capitalize on. You cannot ask a private developer to do anything.
Right.
On their own land. Whenever there's public land use, there has to be some change put in place that X percentage of that must always go towards, and then you have to give them a whole index and 1, 2, and 3 types of AMIs that must be respected, and percentage along with it, depending on which place it is happening at. So there's a lot more work that's focused more about undoing rather than doing something new. So unmaking of the law is a significant issue in front of us because it's the law that has governed our lives for at least last 100 years.
Yes, great. Renee?
Okay, so a few things about this. It will harm people. NYCHA is not 30%. It's up to 30%. There's a difference in there. Some people pay a flat rate depending on how much they make. So those people over the next 5 years will go up to 30%. Therefore, there is harm because people had good jobs, they have good pensions. That means that money that they thought they had will be going to an increased rent. We'll deal with food issues, we'll deal with transportation, we'll deal with health. So yes, going to project-based Section 8 harms people. NYCHA is not just 30%, as I say. So there's a lot of tweaks in there. Last but not least, we already have infill. 401 West 25th Street is an infill building. When you come, you see Citizens of Chelsea, that's an infill building. Allegedly, according to Joe, it was put here because people in this development, in this community, wanted to have their children still live here. There's no guarantee when you get here that the children will live here. We all know about the AMI. We know about what's recently happened. New York City had to do a deal because they did racial segregation. Right now, 20%. It's no longer 50% of the neighborhood, it's 20%, which will go by 2029 to 15%. So you're asking a lot. We're not the sacrifice here. We're not going to do this to help everyone else and get nothing from it, because we have gotten nothing from it. Let's be very real and very honest about that. As Luana has said, there is an affordability issue in everything. Unless you work on that AMI, it is a useless thing. So, infill where? Elliott Chelsea has nothing left to give. We've given it all. There's nothing. You can't keep just putting things in front of Fulton and take a parking lot, take a parking lot, take a parking lot. This was built specifically for community. Air, light, community, sitting down, downstairs in the courtyard and hanging out together. This is what this was built for. It wasn't built for the Black and brown or the Asian. It was specifically built for the white working class. That's most of what NYCHA is. That's who it was built for. Now we come to a new thing that becomes disinvested over time. What more do people want from us? We have nothing left here to give. Where are you going to slap a building? In the middle where that parking lot is? That means you're taking away air and light from 415. People have got to live and breathe.
Yeah.
And as Luana said, it is a vacancy crisis, not a housing crisis. We're seeing boarded up buildings being painted over all over this city and vacant land all over this city. Invest in housing. And by the way, NYCHA is social housing as well. It's just not called that because of who lives there. And as I always say, our incomes are all over the place. We are mixed use. We are what New York is supposed to be. We are ourselves.
Viren, you want to comment?
No, I can't disagree with everything Renee said. Public housing is a sort of multi-layered situation, and I totally agree with you. I mean, there isn't enough room to build anything more at Elliott and Chelsea. There is little room that you could utilize. The question is, how much do you do where and why? And the why is the tricky part of it, because public housing has declared financial bankruptcy. They were intellectually bankrupt the day they were born, but that is something that I can't fix. Financial problem is something that even Jerry Nadler would not take a question on. Section 9 preservation is something that is extremely important. New York City is the only city that is still left at the forefront of it because we have a lot of public housing here. It's a giant mammoth sort of organization in terms of its size. Just the way I mentioned to you, more than 2,000 buildings is what it owns, 3,047 plus public housing land parcels exist in New York City. And if you really go back to history of housing in the 30s, when the first housing was built, it was built for a very different purpose. And Renee is right. It was built for white families. It was built for, let me not say white families necessarily, but the immigrant families that came from Europe and Ireland and other places. And then it became vacant because it was considered to be interim housing. So the people came, lived there, and moved on. When the vacancy became available, then people of color and people with lower resources were moved in. But in the 50s, when Robert Moses came into play, and when he started cleaning up, he started warehousing people of particular race. So that is when it gets weaponized. The cause of public housing was very beautiful. And one of the reasons why USA doesn't call it social housing because of the Russian situation, and socialist is a word that is not very much liked. But yes, it is social housing. In Europe, they call it social housing. UK call it social housing. Vienna does an amazing job of how housing, affordability, and mental health are tied together. In fact, they have a single department that deals with housing and health collectively, not separately. And housing is the first requirement for preservation of mental health, because you don't have a place to live, it can drive you crazy. If you go to Singapore, it does something similar. They don't call it social housing. It's slightly different scenario because everything is owned by the government. Nobody actually owns anything, literally. But we can't do that because we are a capitalist society. So there's a lot more in it that I cannot unpack very easily. But yes, I mean, at some point, maybe I can give you a little historical tour of how public housing developed. The long and short of it is a resource. It is a collective resource, and it must be used collectively. And if you have to find solutions, you cannot find solutions without engaging tenants, whether they agree with you or they don't agree with you. In fact, talk to them if they don't agree with you, because that's where the wealth of information lies. So, the elected weaponizing it because they don't like people who have a differing opinion is a problem. Go talk to tenants, go talk to community, go speak to people who don't like what you have to say, because there might be something you might learn. But thank you, Renee.
Yeah, Baron, thanks. I know there's a couple of, I saw a little blurb up there about good question, Lizette. So I want to get to Lizette. I'm not sure what that question was.
Yes.
And Damu is here
We
too.
talked about
And I'm sure Damu has something to say. Why don't we go to Damu and then we'll go to Lizette. And
Hi, good morning. We have talked about public housing several sessions, over the last few months. And of course, for me, it comes down to it's not just how architect can solve the problem. It's not also just how the urban designer, urban planner can do it. It also comes to Of course, politics, we know all about that. Somehow the city government has to agree on doing certain things in a certain way. But I also talked about how self-management could be tried as as a plan for a certain small area of public housing, maybe one building at a time. Because we just heard that a lot of people are paying up to 30% of their income in the rent at the public housing. So why is there not enough money to manage and maintain it? So if there's a lot of the bureaucracy is huge, if we know that 500,000 apartments are there, and we know that maybe more than 500,000 families live there. So all of those people funding the housing where they live, then why is the issues and all the problems still continue? I'm not going to talk about building more onto the public properties right now because we already had a long discussion about it. But why not create a model for self-governance and then see how people can do a better job at that? Those of us who have lived in New York City in the co-op buildings, we have done self-management, and we know it's not easy, but we take care of it. Whatever needs to be done, we take care of it. And similar thing can be done also at one building at a time, or maybe one complex at a time. People can be taught how to manage all the ways the things can be managed, which includes also maintenance of the buildings, which also includes any capital improvements that need to be done in the buildings. Again, it'll all be based on the participants prioritizing what they want done in their space. And even though we can, at this point, we can say that yes, the ownership still stays with us, with the NYCHA, but at the same time, there's like still a shareholder kind of a relationship. Those who live, they have a right to do certain things within the space, and the money that they're collecting, that whatever they're paying to the NYCHA right now, those funds could be then utilized for self-management. It could be tried, and we have talked about this before, and we also discussed that maybe we have a group of us together come up with a formula on how this can be done. Thank you.
Certainly.
Very good point. I think we talked about that some time back, and we even with the NYCHA we talked about it. They didn't quite like the idea. The community land trust approach is something quite remarkable, and
Yes.
some of the smaller projects of public housing can actually become those kind of CLTs. Those of you who do not know, I think it's a very long conversation, John, but there are a lot of places where, similar to co-ops, the public housing residents can collectively come together, formulate an organization, and kind of become a corporation to run their own show. Now, ownership and all that can be worked out legally, but the management and even to some extent ownership of it can be translated and transferred over to the CLT, depending on how it is structured. In East 157, they have tried that. So you should look up the whole idea of community land trust. They haven't tried that yet with public housing, which I find very troubling. I'll tell you why. Because it's publicly owned land. If you can give 99-year lease to a private developer who's going to capitalize for profit, why would you not give it to the community, which actually wants to collectively own something and transform it collectively, jointly?
Yeah,
So there's a lot more. That's a good point. And there are a number of different ways in which you can skin the cat, to use a bad sort of proverb.
I think it works.
It works. There's a lot of stuff that can be done. And that's why, when I say it's a design problem, it's not simply problem of financial math. It's a problem of collective gain and loss.
Yeah,
Exactly.
I've
Exactly.
often
That's what I think, like we need to come up with a model of how this can be done. And for that, of course, we have Renee and Luana. They have a lot of good experiences being
Yes.
there, and they have worked with many different people. And perhaps Renee and Luana, maybe John and Viren, we can all get together on this specific thing, on
Yeah.
the management of it, if you all feel
Yes.
that would be of interest.
I think it's worth definitely worth exploring. We've got some of our nonprofit partners who are very involved with CLTs. We've had discussions on this issue before, and sure as hell the beats allowing NYCHA to continue management. I
But
just find their management skills appalling. It's been proven. But anyway,
John, I just want to say a couple
go ahead.
very quickly.
What's that? Mhm.
Professor Brahmbhatt, I put a question on the chat. It's rhetorical. I mean, I know that probably there's no answer to that, but I wonder, with all your knowledge and your experience as a neighbor, how can you make sure that all that knowledge is shared at the right time? I mean, I think that the window is closing, and when we keep talking, things are moving, and I'm afraid that all these good ideas are going to be thrown to the air. And then we're talking about expanding, and we're not talking too much about the people that live there. So I hate to see that the conversations always go to gains and profit, and we are losing the humanity of the issue. I mean, we are talking about the homes of people that have lived there and have their dreams. So how can you, in your position, share that knowledge with elected officials, but in a timely way, so that, for example, this guy just left Selnor, and they talk and talk, but they don't talk about the issues, and they will be elected probably, and we're going to be screwed. So how can this happen?
Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, should I answer right now? We're probably running out of time, John.
Yeah,
So,
we are.
but I'll just quickly say, I have tried to connect with the elected. I have tried even with the community board 4. I've even offered to give them a whole presentation. I'm also connected with some remarkable people in the city. Richard Plants, who is a very well-known architect and urban designer who taught at Columbia University and has written an amazing book. If you haven't got a chance to read it, you should. It's called History of New York City Housing. It does include a whole bunch on public housing too. So no, you might think that I'm not speaking of people. I'm only speaking of people, actually. It's actually the other way around. The people in NYCHA matter. And one thing I said over and over, when you speak of community, please do not divorce NYCHA as NYCHA and rest of Chelsea as Chelsea. No, they are one community and they should always be treated as one. The problems have come up and they're easily maneuvered by elected and everybody else, is because we make that disconnect, because we actually draw that dividing line, and they jump on it, they capitalize on it.
Yeah. I'm going to, it is getting late. I'm going to give
Renee has a
Renee,
quick
yep,
comment,
yep. I see her. I'm going
Okay.
to give Renee a last question, and then I think we need another conversation. This is good. And I think Damu and I think we have to put forth our plan. I've said this often. They're not going to give it to us. I think we have to really kind of break it down and do the work and put forth the community plan. And it sounds like you could really help us do that. Renee, you want to go ahead, take yourself
So
off?
everyone keeps talking about resident management. We've done that. It's been done in other places. So Boston, Brumley Heath, St. Louis, Cochrane Gardens, Washington, D.C., Kenilworth, Parkside. They've all failed. And they've gone back to become what are called mixed income communities. There's one that survived, and that's in New Orleans, and they are project-based Section 8. So we understand that under the 964 regulations, we can have resident management companies. So we already know this. It's been being worked on for years. There's people who are trying to do it now. Also, another person was told by Danny Sherrod they could only do it if they come project-based Section 8. So we need to stop acting like we haven't been trying to do it. We've been doing that all along. So we do know about resident management companies. The thing with that is also you most likely will have to find a development that's either 1 or 2 buildings, because everything else means you're moving people around. And that's another problem that you will have to deal with, because this is about people. They may have lived in these apartments 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years. You're not going to ask them to leave because you want one building to experiment with. No, it would have to be done at a smaller building. It would most likely it would have to be done under Section 9 prerequisites. And can that be done? Or take only a part of the development and say that you're going to have a resident management company that deals with sanitation, that deals with the cleaning of the building. Those are things that can be done, and that can be worked towards too. But we have been working on this for years. We're very much aware of the 964 regulations. So we know this.
Well, this is excellent. I'm so glad that you have told us some of this information. I'll have to look up the 964 regulation, and I think if you become our advisor, become part of the team that looks at this, will be very, very useful for at least for us to talk about this plan further. And in fact, I thought that perhaps NYCHA should actually do this as a pilot plan, not just the residents, because NYCHA can then train the people in maintenance and also in bookkeeping and other management things that people can learn. And so would be also interesting at some point to talk to the NYCHA management and say, how about this is something that Renee and Damu and Luana and others have put together, and can we talk about this? And maybe there are things that they will have to tell us what else can be done. So this is something like exploration. I will of course look up some more things, and if you have an opportunity, if you can send me some material that you are already aware of, then we can start to write up an agenda for one of the meetings next month, or even some intermittent meeting in between some point. Will be
Well, you
really.
would also have to get a new management of NYCHA. They consider us real estate and they are leveraging us.
Yes.
So where we live,
I
the
see.
buildings we live in, the areas we live in, which are now areas of opportunity when they weren't. So frankly, that's a new manager. And frankly, the people who are in control of this public housing agency would need to be replaced. That's the thing that has to be done.
Yeah.
And if the money goes to the state, then that's where the pressure needs to go, since public housing law is state law. And if they give control to city, then that's where the pressure needs to be. But it's really figuring who our targets need to be in every part of public housing, because the social housing authority is actually the public housing, because everything that's in there was taken from public housing. So fix what you have instead of building something new.
I totally agree. You don't, they tore down Hotel Pennsylvania, which had 1,000 rooms, and that makes absolutely no sense. They could have used that public housing. They could have also converted that into to house the homeless people, and they tore it down. And anything that gets torn down, which is sound, structurally sound, I think that's a crime against the
Yeah.
city. And anytime somebody wants to go and get a permit to tear something down, they should prove that this thing is not viable in terms of the structural stability, not just viable in terms of their business opportunities or whatever they have. So I think that's, and of course now with the mayor election coming up, I was going to ask, how does the public housing advocates talk to the candidates? So how is that going to come around? And with 800,000 residents in public housing, there are so many votes there. And the new mayor election should be, they should be listening. The candidates should be listening to what NYCHA residents want.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
it's more
There's
than a
been some.
population of a small town.
Yeah. There's been some webinars. I don't know if Renee maybe can answer this, but I know they've had a little forum for them, but as a whole, as a public housing whole, that would be interesting too, I think.
RPPH, Residents to Preserve Public Housing, is having a Thursday meeting with Zoran Mondani.
Okay,
So he'll be on their Zoom.
Yeah.
that's the
can
one I
send
was
that to you,
thinking
John.
about. Yeah,
Yeah.
But Zoran loves infill.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Thanks, Damu. Wonderful comments, everybody. Is there anything pressing right now? We're way over time. I know. I noticed Marquis didn't make it, but this presentation was really intense, I think, and a lot of information. And
I have two questions, John.
Go ahead.
Viren, you mentioned the book on zoning. What was the title?
Color of Law.
Color of Law.
Say it again.
Color of Law.
Color of Law. And also, I think Lisette, she didn't finish her statement. We talked about the structural integrity of the buildings and that the buildings are not the way they prescribe them to be. The infrastructure may have problems, but the buildings are solid. You didn't address that as well.
The building structurally seem to be fine. There might be issues that can not be fixed. So in other words, yes, maintenance has always been a problem with public housing. The buildings can be standard. I don't think there's any problem with that. When I say infrastructure, what I mean is there are sidewalks that are 3 feet wide in Chelsea, and they're going to remain 3 feet wide, but a flow of 5,000 families moving in, if any changes are put in place, there is no provision for how that's going to be fixed.
Yeah, I was talking about the actual buildings, but I don't want to keep everybody.
Actual building,
because I know where I live now, because of the infrastructure of New York City, the pipes and so on, and the new laws, the local laws that you have to, the FIS work and all the different things that you have to do to maintain your buildings and your property, it's different from NYCHA because they haven't been doing that. So a lot of the infrastructure problems like the pipes and so on and so forth that have been degrading over the years, when you live in a co-op, you pay for those things, right? But when you live in NYCHA, NYCHA is supposed to take care of those things. So those are the main problems, because I can tell you, I cannot hear my neighbor when I lived in NYCHA like I can hear my neighbor when I live in my new building. So I just wanted to say that.
So true.
They are structurally sound buildings.
No, you're absolutely right. There's a lot of mismanagement, and a lot of it is by design, because more often than not, if you want something to fail, let it fall. And if you want something to fall, let it fail. And that is a design strategy that public housing has used tremendously. But there's a lot more conversation, John. I mean, I'll be happy to come back and speak about other things, but it's a longer session that we might need for that.
Yeah. No, this was good. And I that last comment, what you just said was actually right on, and that's what they've been doing. And Lisette, I don't know if I apologize if I cut you off. I thought you were finished.
No, that's
there.
okay. I'm glad that Luana pick it up. Thank you.
Okay. And as far as the color of law, if you go down to it was on a newsletter, I'm sorry. I've been promoting Rothstein's new book on our newsletter, and that's he seems to have solutions for us. And I think the forum with him I think we're going to do this in November. He's going to be discussing solutions and talking about the racism that's been long endured and embedded in our zoning. And Viren, perhaps you might want to participate in that.
Absolutely.
Can I say one thing? I just want to say, I just feel so grateful for the discussion today. It was wonderful. And Viren, we know that you were you're not able to stay on the community board because of maybe because of your comments around the DEIS, around NYCHA. And so we're talking about planning and structure, and that all is of the most importance. But here also this kind of political climate of repression, the lying, right? The ways in which our electeds are colluding with related. And so I would just love to hear, I don't know, just I know we're out of time, but it feels so essential to what's actually happening in our community. And I'd love to just hear your perspective on that.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. Viren, I wanted to bring that up, but we were running out of time. I do want to have a discussion on that, but yeah, could you comment on what Caitlin said? And And do you feel free to talk about these issues that's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, just very quickly, it happened, and I got 20 calls from the elected who actually made that happen, begging me so that the CRDC email doesn't go out. And he said I made a serious mistake, and he acknowledged it. And I appreciate that he's reaching out. What I don't appreciate is that you're reaching out because of the pressure that you feel, not because the wrongness of your decision. At the same time, he's acknowledging it. For me, it's a larger question, and which I would probably discuss via email shortly. But I think community boards are at the lowest rung of how the cities are governed, and city governance should matter. People don't get to speak much when the laws are put in place or designed downtown. So if you throttle the community's voice, then you're doing disservice to the purpose for which you are elected, because it's the same people who put you in there that you're trying to put out. So I think that is my fundamental problem. That if we select you and elect you, you don't get to select and diselect us when you actually come to us to hear our voices. That's number one. Number two is, I'm going to go back to my father's statement that you keep your, I'm not going to use the exact words that he used, but he said, you keep your friends close, but you keep your friends who don't agree with you closer. And the reason why that is important is because you learn a lot from people who don't agree with you than the people who agree with you, because they're going to just make you believe that you're the most wonderful guy on the planet, while you might not be one, which a friend might point out to you. And last but not the least is, last time I checked, democracy had a definition, and this goes completely against that definition. And that bothers me, because anyone, whether it's selected, elected, invited, asked to speak, as a public member, should respect the other exactly the same way he or she would expect respect giving back to them. So that's where I am. So I don't know where I stand. I'm going to become a public member because that's something that I've been promised, and I will still have a voice in the community board, and I appreciate that. And it matters to me to have that voice in there. And according to what the elected has mentioned to me, number of times, he's going to try and put me back on the board. But my problem is, why break it if you can't fix it? And that's exactly where we are right now. We are breaking things without knowing how we're going to fix them back.
Yeah, I think we should have came out strong and swinging when they started packing the community boards with Open New York folks. I think then it might have not came to this point with you. Our demands are going to be to put you back where you should be because of your background and your knowledge, and our demands are going to be to remove the developer-friendly folks. It's a community board. They can put them on the bids or whatever they want to do. They can create their own little board if they want, but it's supposed to be community board. And I've often had reservations about how deeply they were caring for the community. A lot of people on there with certain objectives, and they really looked at public housing as a separate entity, and it's for decades that's how it's been looked at, and that's the problem. And I think the community board has been not that they had any power, but as far as laws and so forth, but they haven't really thought about the low income and the public housing, rent controlled, rent stabilized. They haven't fought hard enough. And I think this is the time for us to do that. Any last burning questions? Now that we're a half an hour over.
Well, just thank you, Professor Viren. You're awesome. Thank you for the work that you do. And we support you as much as we can. And thank you, Damu.
Yeah. Okay. And I apologize for going off the. I'm sorry.
You.
Yeah. Apologize for going off the agenda. I know we've missed a few items, and I know Emma left from the community court, and I forgot about her. Any new people that want to have any updates at all? Benjamin Moore, that's an interesting name. I think you're a first time I've seen this name. Maybe I'm wrong.
You've probably seen it somewhere.
Yeah.
If anybody needs a gallon, I have a truck parked out front.
Has a what? Oh, a gallon.
If anybody needs a gallon, I have a truck parked out front.
Are you a community member? Can you tell us a little bit about you?
No, I live way uptown, but
Okay.
I'm friends with one of your members.
Oh, terrific. Glad to have you. I hope you continue to come.
I was recruited. I was recruited by Damu to pay a visit.
Okay. Okay. All right. Good. Stacy and Lee, you want to say hello? Guess not. Maybe.
Hi, I'm Stacy Lee. I'm the Director of Programming at Encore Community Services. And if anyone's interested in collaborating with us or partnerships, feel free to reach out.
Okay. I bring food to you guys all the time, right?
Yes, I heard. I'm actually going to put my contact information. If anyone's interested in reaching out to us, I can connect you with whichever the delivery meal department, programming department, and our case management department as well.
Yeah. We've been dealing with Miriam over there at the 48th Street, I think. Well, good to have you here. I appreciate having you.
Thank you very much.
Anybody else? Any last updates? Any notes? Okay. All right. Thanks again, Viren. Thanks for all your input. Renee, thank you so much. Luana, Lisette, Leonard, everybody. We'll see you next month, the first Tuesday of the month at 9:30, and I'll try and have an agenda out for you soon. And we'll see you all soon. We'll just keep fighting.
Thank you, John. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, everyone.
Some amazing comments, though, I must say. Thank you, Renee.
Welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Renee, call me and let me know if you need anything. Have a great afternoon.